Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. There's an excellent video up. It's real short. It's just a minute long, in which champion Danny Garcia is asked who he thinks would win the Saul Alvarez Trout matchup. Now all I can say is understand, Angel Garcia, Danny's father, and Danny, whatever the press says, however the press wants to portray these guys as crazy and stuff like that, these guys are insightful and they speak the truth. Right? Angel Garcia, quite frankly, is someone I track because he's one of the few guys in boxing who tells it like it is. Well, Danny Garcia, who took apart Amir Khan and took apart Eric Morales, literally shakes his head when asked a question about Trout versus Canelo because to him it's obvious that Canelo is in trouble. I'll make a video as that fight gets closer if it ever gets announced. But my initial take on that fight is that Trout dismantles Canelo. Danny Garcia in the video says, who has Canelo fought? Well, let me just put it this way. Canelo has fought some big names, Shane Mosley, for example. But he hasn't run into a guy who literally can keep him at the end of a jab like Trout can. If you look at Trout's numbers, his CompuBox numbers, you're going to see that few guys in the sport throw as many jabs as Trout. And Trout is able to operate from distance, right? Canelo, while he's improving and while he's a devastating puncher, right? Let's remember, I actually predicted that Canelo would walk through Josecito Lopez. I've taken Canelo in fights, just like I took Trout over Miguel Cotto. But my point is this, as good as Canelo is, and he is a devastating body puncher, he is one of the hardest punchers in the sport pound for pound, right? Canelo doesn't have elite hand speed. Canelo doesn't have elite foot speed, right? Quite frankly, I'm one of those who is wondering how he beat Miguel Vasquez, the lightweight champion, who I think is faster. I have yet to see a film on those fights. I'd welcome the opportunity to do so. So Canelo is that fighter who, if you can't fight from distance behind a jab and make foot speed and hand speed an issue, in other words, force him to get through your offense, to get through a stiff jab, right? Force him to have to catch up with you, to land punches. If you can't set up that dynamic, you're in trouble, just like Ryan Rhodes was. You're going to get hit with hooks. You're going to get blown out. But if you look carefully at the guys Canelo has fought, right? Ryan Rhodes, Shane Mosley, Carlos Baldomir, all of the guys he's fought, he hasn't yet fought that guy who can stick a jab and move. And of course, stick a stiff jab. So the guy's not just keeping Canelo on the outside, the guy's actually hurting him in the process. I think Trout beats Canelo from distance, right? Canelo, of course, because he's one of the sport's hardest punchers, you have to hedge the play with Canelo by knockout. right? This is boxing. All a guy needs is a punch to have a chance to beat you. He doesn't have to win any rounds. He just has to land that punch and take you out, right? But I believe that Austin Trout, who has never lost and who's a difficult matchup, you're talking about a southpaw who can fight long behind the jab, and he's high volume with the jab. And of course, if you get inside, Trout knows how to tie you up and wrestle you, as he did and overmatched, quite frankly, Miguel Cotto, right? Brian Kenny and I saw the same fight there. Austin Trout setting himself up and then dominating most of the fight. I know the public didn't quite see it that way, but it looked to me like Austin Trout was in control of that Miguel Cotto fight. I believe he'd be in similar control against Saul Alvarez. Quite frankly, if I were Alvarez, I would think about fighting Floyd Mayweather before I fought Austin Trout. It's a fame type of thing. You lose to Mayweather, people will say, well, you've lost to the best, and you were young. You lose to Austin Trout, and suddenly other questions emerge, right? Are you even the best of your generation, right? If you're losing to Austin Trout, how do we know you're not going to lose to some of the other names in the division? James Kirkland, a famous fight that somehow didn't happen. And Carlos Molina, a personal favorite of mine who I've seen, quite frankly, beat guys and get robbed, right? The Molina, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight, the Molina, James Kirkland fight. If I'm Canelo, I think about legacy. And let me just point out too, and it's something I hope fighters truly consider. Legacy is worth millions of dollars. If you're negotiating with a superstar, if you're negotiating with a Floyd Mayweather or a Manny Pacquiao, understand you don't have a lot of leverage. Also, let's get old school. Even if you fight for peanuts in that fight, you need to understand that you'd be paid millions if you just look respectable in the fight, right? If you have a moment, if you somehow are able to land and hurt a Mayweather or a Pacquiao in a round and have fans thinking, oh wow, maybe if he had just landed one more punch, he would have won this fight. And you're going to get millions in the ring for your next fight. You're going to be a hot commodity on pay-per-view. And of course, you're going to get millions outside the ring as sponsors are going to line up for a potential superstar. So I believe that these fighters make a mistake. I see David Price making it right now in the UK, where rather than go for the brass ring, rather than go for the superstar, rather than fight the Klitschko or the Mayweather, these guys, for whatever reason, have bought into some pay your dues mythology, and they end up taking on lesser known fighters who are very dangerous, right? Just because the public doesn't fully appreciate who Austin Trout is, doesn't mean that Austin Trout, when he's in the ring, doesn't feel that he's the better man. Right? Canelo can't match Austin Trout's jab. Canelo can't match Austin Trout's hand speed. Canelo, quite frankly, can't match Austin Trout's slickness. Right? Keep in mind, Austin Trout's a southpaw. He fights long. Right? Austin Trout made Canelo's brother, Rigoberto Alvarez, look awfully slow when they fought. Now, I understand that Canelo was at the fight, and Canelo, of course, to protect the family name, wants to fight Austin Trout. Canelo, if I were you, I would take the money instead, and I would fight Floyd Mayweather. You land a lucky punch on Austin Trout, and people will say, good for you. You land a lucky punch on Floyd Mayweather, you're in the history books with a lucrative rematch if Floyd wants to continue his career, or with big fights against a host of other big names. I understand that Canelo has booked May 4th for a fight in Vegas. Canelo, in my opinion, you'll be making a huge mistake if that fight is against Austin Trout. I like Trout over Canelo. Trout will likely be the underdog because, of course, the public loves Canelo and Canelo has a belt and has the name. So you should be able to get better than even money odds on Austin Trout over Canelo, and I would hedge the play because, as I've said before, Canelo is one of the hardest punchers, pound for pound, in the sport, right? It's literally because he has fought guys like Matthew Hatton and guys like Shane Mosley. In other words, these are the kind of guys who can survive tornadoes that people don't seem to realize that Canelo hits as hard as he does, right? Shane Mosley never been knocked out in his career. The fact that Shane Mosley hung on for dear life and went the distance with Canelo doesn't mean that if Canelo fights 100 guys, 90 of them aren't gonna get stopped, right? So I like Trout to win the fight, hedged against Canelo by KO. What I don't see happening is unbeaten Canelo outboxing Austin Trout. I just don't see that happening. Trout, foot speed wise, and foot speed seems to be the most undervalued part of analyzing fights. Foot speed wise, it's not close. Canelo just doesn't move like Austin Trout. Let me also point out too that Canelo has a tendency between fights to gain a lot of weight. He's one of those guys who has weighed 167 pounds a few days before a fight, and then, as only boxers can do, magically lose like 10 pounds to make weight. Against a guy with great foot speed, working behind a jab, who's going to force you to come find him, like Austin Trout, guys who are carrying extra weight on fight night are going to look sluggish. I would expect Canelo to look awfully sluggish against Austin Trout. Let me go one step further. Stamina. I know officially Canelo has done things like gone 12 rounds with Shane Mosley. But let me just say, in my opinion, Canelo is a young guy who's not as well conditioned as he could be. I know it's controversial, but there's a difference between a guy surviving 12 rounds, fighting in bursts, taking breathers for, let's say, 30 seconds at a time in a round, and then fighting in a burst and taking another breather. There's a difference between a guy like that and a guy who is always humming. A guy like Manny Pacquiao a couple years ago. Great shape, could fight for 3 minutes of every round. You could tell just looking at the punch stat numbers, right? Some guys can throw 100 punches every round, right? Antonio Margarito, when he was in his prime, he was in shape, right? He was a tornado for 3 minutes of every round. That's not Canelo. He hasn't been totally exposed because he hasn't fought a guy like Austin Trout who would force him to try to work for 3 minutes of every round, right? I'm guessing that Austin Trout would take control of that fight, and at the end of 6 rounds, Canelo would realize that he'd need to take Austin Trout out to win the fight, that he's not going to win a decision, no matter how popular he is. And of course, Canelo would then start picking his spots, because I don't believe he has the stamina to go hard for 3 minutes every round. I know that's an unpopular view, but hey, that's my view, and I'm just sharing it with you. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com, predictboxing.blogspot.com. where I encourage fans to leave their predictions too in the comment sections, as well as at Dwyer VIP. Thanks for watching.